Good morning, everyone. This is the meeting of the Housing Opportunities Commission's Development and Finance Committee of December 16th. On my right is Commission Chair Pro Tem Rick Nelson, and with us online is Commissioner Jeffrey Merkowitz, and I am Jackie Simon, Chair of the Commission. I would like to introduce Executive Director Chelsea Andrews, and we will move into the agenda when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're ready to go.
The first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of our November 18 committee meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The minutes of November are approved. Our next item, I believe, you would like to kick off for us?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I am presenting before this committee for consideration a request to approve extending the existing contracts of the bond underwriting team, consisting of a senior manager and co-managers in accordance with our procurement policy. This is a short-term extension request, just 4 months, to allow us an opportunity to have the full and deliberative process that we undergo in selecting these consultants that provide support to us. I am going to turn it over to our Acting Director of Mortgage Finance, Jennifer Hines-Washington, to explain the details of this request.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Jennifer Washington, Acting Director of Mortgage Finance. And I'm here to request to extend the existing contracts of the bond underwriting team for up to 4 months in accordance with the procurement policy. The Commission's bond underwriters help to structure HOC's bond issuances and market the bonds to retail and institutional investors. Our existing contracts, which were entered into in 2019, for the Commission's 6 bond underwriters were for an initial 2 years with 2 optional 1-year renewals for a maximum term of 4 years. The Commission approved each renewal that extended the contract until January 28, 2023. Staff is currently working with the existing bond underwriting team on the $29 million multifamily bond issuance for residences on the lane that will fund an estimated $27.5 million permanent FHA risk share mortgage loan. Pricing of the bonds is expected to occur in early February, with closing in mid-February 2023. In order to not disrupt the residences on the lane transaction and the ongoing work of our existing underwriters, staff recommends that the existing contracts for our team of underwriters be extended to up to 4 months to allow for any slippage in the closing of the bonds. Work to establish a new team is underway. Our request for proposal number 2353 was published in October, and we've received 12 responses from various institutions. Among them is our group of 6 underwriters and the new slate of firms. Our evaluation team, consisting of mortgage finance staff, our executive director, the Commission's financial advisor, and select commissioners, will recommend the new team of underwriters to the full Commission, as we've done in the past. Interviews for qualified respondents and the final selection of the new team of underwriters will conclude before the end of January. And I'll be happy to take any questions you may have.
Any questions?
What do we think the current environment is? The current environment is going to have
For next month?
Yes.
I have not received any indications as of yet, but I can get that information back to you.
I will also add that, good morning, Rick. My name is Kyrene Brown, Deputy Executive Director. I would also add that the bond issuance that's planned will consist of variable rate bonds. So these bonds will be repriced weekly. And so whatever the initial pricing is, we can expect that the price will change on a weekly basis. It's also supported by a long-term swap agreement, which will fix the interest rate. And as we've explained to you before, we have some indication as to what that pricing is, and it's much lower than we anticipated last year. So we're expecting better performance because of the swap, and the underlying variable rate will change weekly, so that what we pay the bondholders and what we receive from the counterparty will offset each other, generally speaking, and the fixed rate on the swap will be the mortgage rate going forward.
Thank you.
When we look at various bidders and there is a committee of staff and occasionally, I guess, commissioners, does that committee change? Is it a different mix of staff and commissioners, with various proposals that we are evaluating? Or is the committee that reviews the bids always the same committee?
The evaluation team has typically included select commissioners that are recommended via the deputy director to the executive director. We have staff from the mortgage finance and finance team. I believe that is written in the procurement policy.
Okay.
But the people probably do change.
I see. Okay. Thank you. That was just for my information. I appreciate it. Is there?
I would move approval of recommendation to support the staff recommendation for the full commission.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any other questions or discussion before call the vote? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Washington. And next, we'll be moving into a review of our headquarters. Just last week, I had another commissioner say, when are we going to start hearing about the headquarters? So this is timely.
Wonderful. And thank you again, Madam Chair. Absolutely, we're excited every time we're providing updates related to our headquarters. And of course, there's always work taking place between the updates. As you can see, this request is specifically related to the selection of our general contractor. I will turn it over to our real estate team, both Marcus Irvin, the Director of Development, as well as Jay Shepard, our Housing Acquisitions Manager, to provide details related to this procurement and our recommendation moving forward.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. For the record, Marcus Irvin, Director of Development, here at HOC, here to present a additional action for the HOC headquarters, specifically approval to select a general contractor. Before we get started, we'll just preface it by saying that this is one action as part of many in leading this effort to getting underway. So today will just be the selection of a general contractor. You can anticipate that we'll have future actions, including the more involved finance plan, development plan, and then also some additional procurement. So I'll turn it over to Jay.
Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you, Marcus. My name is Jay Shepard, and I'm the Housing Acquisition Manager in Real Estate Development. And I'll just walk you through the packet, and then if you have any questions at any point, actually just stop and let me know. So as Marcus mentioned, this is our approval to select a general contractor for the construction of the headquarter building. And we'll walk through this. If we can go to slide 3. For those of you not familiar with this opportunity, this is the procurement for the general contractor to build HOC's new headquarter building, which went through a mandatory referral process to build a approximately 83,000 square foot building, 9 stories at 2nd and Fenwick in downtown Silver Spring. And the staff has already been through that process. It's been approved. Both steps of the mandatory referral process were approved. And the design team finished the building permit set and has submitted that to Department of Permitting Services for their review and for the ultimate building permits for the property. So that's currently in process. And so staff, as Marcus mentioned, are working now on the final development plan as well as the financing plan, and we will be returning back to the commission to present those and go through those. And so, but a step in that next step is to ultimately procure a general contractor. And so we issued RFP 2340, my apologies. That was that we'll go through here, and we're ultimately asking for the approval to select a general contractor as a result of that. If you go to the next slide, we actually issued this procurement. We had 8 firms that attended the pre-bid conference of this. It was solicited on the central vendor registration system, and the scope of the work basically outlined the entire construction of the building, including fit out. And so 4 firms responded, and 2 firms were ultimately considered responsible and responsive. And they were judged or scored on the following characteristics that you see on this particular slide. Qualifications and experience with a downtown urban market in a complex environment like that, where you're doing construction and maintaining road traffic. That was heavily considered. They had to have experience in Montgomery County and working with not just HOC, but the other partners that we have in the county. Their recent experience with high rise and with this type of construction was also considered and reviewed. The price was obviously very important, and so price actually was our second most important criteria. We did review, the 2 and compared them, and you'll see they actually differed by less than 1% in their pricing. So we were very happy to see that kind of dedicated review that they provided. We had 15 points assigned for MFD participation, and the firms had to meet certain threshold required criteria to be able to get points for that particular criteria.
Would you, just for the purpose of the people that may not know MFD, would you?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, minority and female and disabled company. And so that has to be an enterprise that could be either a supplier or the firm itself that are providing the materials. So for a general contractor to meet this criteria, they would actually be able to demonstrate or have to demonstrate that the subcontractors that work for them and provide that, or the suppliers that are providing the material, are firms that are registered as minority, female, or disabled.
Thank you.
References were considered, and they received 5 points based on their references, and then their financial strength was very much considered and taken into account. The 2 firms that on the next slide that were responsible and responsive are Paradigm Contractors and Southway Builders, and both firms had demonstrated the financial strength and robustness to be able to complete a job like this, but they also had the experience with the type of construction, as I mentioned. One firm in particular, Paradigm, I think, had more experience, and you'll see in the scoring that is probably why they were distinguished against Southway. And so on the next slide, we actually ranked the 2 firms together, and you'll see really in the qualification section, Paradigm gained and garnered more points than Southway, 43 points to 27. And it's really the track record that Paradigm has had with high-rise construction projects in the area. They've also had experience with projects that have the same type of energy goals that we have for this, that are beyond LEED Silver, which is the county's minimum standard, that they've demonstrated and proven to deliver buildings that have that higher energy need. And so they also had demonstrated that their subcontractor plan included 25.31% of MFD or minority female disabled participation. Southway's subcontractor plan had just under 16%. And so that also differentiated their points. HOC has had recent experience with Paradigm. They just finished HOC at the Upton 2, which is now called Residences on the Lane. And that's a downtown multifamily building in Rockville, the tallest multifamily building in Rockville. And it has just delivered. And so that experience also worked into HOC's reference because we had direct recent experience with HOC did not have prior direct experience with Southway. However, their references also checked out to be equally good in many regards. So their point that they garnered were basically the same in that category. And then financial strength, they both were able to demonstrate financial strength. They included the payment and performance bond that always comes with the surety in the RFP. The next slide just highlights the MFD participation in their pricing. And both respondents demonstrated direct MFD employment efforts for the first area consideration, which was worth 5 points. But for the second area consideration, Paradigm subcontractor plan was higher, and therefore it was worth 5 additional points. And so therefore Paradigm achieved 10 points in this category versus 5 for Southway. The next slide. The proposed cost that Paradigm has that we have in this updated development budget model is $49,250,000. And you can see that that actually is an increase of approximately 16.2 million from the last time that we had presented this in the pre-construction budget. And the reasons for that are several. There's been inflation in material and labor costs in the market. There's been a greater allowance for contingencies that we are taking into account for potential inflation in the future. There was a change from an all concrete structure or to an all concrete structure from a steel and concrete. And that also added to the expense. But that also gives us flexibility in the future that if you have that type of structure, you can actually do a lot more with those floor plates than if it was the structure that we had switched out of. And there was also the overall sort of pricing effort that had preceded this was in some ways not as robust as what we had asked these firms to do. There was a pre-construction firm on board that had provided some information. They were involved in the process. They were providing updates, but they weren't digging into the details as deeply as we had asked these firms to do in this RFP. And so we expected that the prices would be much closer to what the actual costs would be. And they did do a good job of that. They provided that. They really got into each category, and we felt very, very confident that they had reviewed the plans exceptionally well and provided the pricing that would match and associate with that. And so, again, this development budget is a current update. We are gonna return back to the commission with the development plan and how this budget impacts and how the financing will be handled to accommodate that.
Jay, can I just ask a little bit about this? Because you said that this was expected, but so this is about a third higher than what previously was budgeted, right?
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
Which was
is that typical? I mean, that it seems like a lot.
It does. It was the last time it was projected. The budget was not quite a year ago, and so in that time frame, we have seen inflationary increases that are not necessarily a third, but almost 20-some%. And so that has had an impact. And I would also say just the more robust cost estimating is going on here in this bid process was better. It frankly was more detailed. It really got to the accuracy of what we were asking to be bid.
So therefore, fewer cost overruns, and
Exactly.
we know what we're heading to more effectively than we did.
That's how we feel about it now. That's correct.
And so would we not expect to see as many changes going forward?
Yeah, I mean, there's still, inflation is still at 8%, and we are monitoring that very closely. But we have built in extra contingency just in our budget, and that's the area above that's circled. We have 2.7 million in hard cost contingency, and we have a 1.6 million in just escalation alone, to account for the fact that right now we're asking for your approval to negotiate the contract with this contractor. We by the time it's executed and the development plan, let's say, and finance plan are approved in the spring, those costs are there to account for increases that we expect to see between now and then.
The question I have on that though is, had a discussion recently with another project where converting to concrete was saving the money. I would follow it. You're saying that compared to concrete, in this case, increasing the costs. I'm not sure I understand that. The other question I just have, and it goes back to this whole volatility in the market. You talk about the possibility of increases, but there are, according to these reports, some decreases occurring like that.
Mm-hmm.
How will that be catastrophic? How can it be catastrophic? Value engineering, we're in the middle of a strange market. And I hate to say this, commit $48 million, and all of a sudden, things go the opposite of where they've been going, and they go down. Does that mean we're going to be paying more than we should for building?
Gotcha. Well, I'll address it first.
Jay, sorry, real quickly, would you mind repeating a little bit of what Rick said? It's a little garbled from this end.
Okay, so the first question was the conversion to concrete. Why is the cost more when on a recent project you've seen those costs less? And in this particular case, and I may be familiar with what you're referring to. So it would depend what you're switching out of into this new concrete. So if it's let's say a steel or prescient product into a concrete, there may be savings there. What we had actually proposed on this particular project was a PT or post-tension type concrete system. That was the original that we were using as the basis for design. It meant thinner floors, but also it requires a rebar inside the concrete that's pulled at a tension when it's constructed. And buildings of PT design are good for maximizing floor space inside. You can have taller ceilings because the floors are thinner. However, in the future, if there's any change to the building, or if you want to, let's say, core drill or drill through that concrete to switch the use, or switch, like have something vertically rising in the building, it becomes very tricky to know exactly where those post-tension rebar points are, because if you hit one, they'll burst. And so our thinking about a year ago was to go through and switch it to a mild steel, which would be there'd be reinforcement in the, but it wouldn't be post tension like that. And it would be much more flexible as a floor plate to be able to essentially do more with it and give you that flexibility in the future. The trade-off is that the floors are thicker and that there's more concrete essentially, and that it's just a different design. And so it will require higher cost as a result. It's just a different type of concrete. And so what we were switching out of, which was more cost effective in some regards, is now a little more expensive.
And it also would result in lower ceilings.
And it results in, yes.
And what impact does that have on energy consumption?
That, well, actually, we asked the architect that question. Will this have a negative impact on our overall energy needs in the building? And they actually ran models based on that. And they looked at airflow, they looked at heat retention. And so it turns out all the factors, it has a very minimal impact, turns out, on our overall energy. This is a building that we are thinking we will be owning it long term. This isn't something we're building to sell. And so some of these costs up front are designed to offset long term either operating costs or drive down our energy costs of using the building. And so it may cost a little bit more on the front end to gain those benefits on the back end. And I know other projects at HOC also consider that. You know, that's a very much something that we think about all the time. And so to us, I hope that answers your first question.
Yeah, and I think to the point about the second question, you'll hear a similar narrative with Hillendale. We are in an uncertain environment. Oh, sorry. You had the second question involved, we're in this inflationary environment. Sort of what are we doing and how are we navigating that? On both projects, we have a skilled set of pre-con general contractors. We've got third-party construction management professionals. So part of this first ask with getting the approval to select that contractor engages in the next step that you'll see coming forth from Hillendale, which is the more detailed forensic analysis of the construction budget, identifying where there's cost savings, the whole value engineering exercise, and getting to that point where we come to you with a full development and financing plan. So there's additional work going on behind the scenes. But in this effort, this is the first stage of what you saw in Hillendale, just a couple weeks to about 2 months ago. So we will engage in that next stage.
I had a question on the review and the contingencies as you've inserted. Does that not, the knowledge of those amounts that are public now, do they not limit our negotiating power when we're negotiating the contract itself? Because they know what we have budgeted for. So doesn't that in effect tip the hand in favor of the contractor as far as negotiations go?
Well, I would say no, because they submitted their proposal, which included a price that was good for, I believe, 90 days. So for 120 days, it's either 90 or 120 days. They have to honor that price. Now we haven't gone through the process of any kind of value engineering on this yet. It's possible we will, it's possible we won't. But either way, the contractor, even though they've seen our number, we've seen their number.
Okay.
And so they have to honor that number.
I see. And I had two other questions. As I recall, the top floor and the roof are going to be, well, the roof is going to have amenities for all of the occupants. So it forecloses solar on the building. Is that why we're going to the garage 7 to get our solar power?
Yes, the consideration for solar was definitely thought about at this property. We initially thought that we could achieve net zero in the construction, and net zero is a definition that says you're using as much electricity as you're generating on site. And so, one of the options was to figure out how to do that. And solar power next to, well, so this building sits next to a very large structured parking garage, which you had mentioned. And the county is currently undergoing an RFP, I believe, for solar power on its garages. And I could be wrong.
Yeah, and also just structurally from the HQ project, the capacity on the roof is limited, so that does limit the amount of solar that you can produce. But as far as the county working on an RFP for use of solar, of which there's many ways to structure that in terms of who could be a subscriber and benefit from that. So, but I still think to the point of how the building is being developed, that solar is one of those things that could take you to the next level, but we're still making sure that we can meet the county's guideline for commercial buildings.
I have one other question. The budget for artwork, I trust this is a government requirement.
In terms of public artwork, or just art within the building as part of the
We're required to provide amenities, in this case, artwork for the building as a public agency, or is that mandated for any construction that would have been on that site?
Any construction would have some public art requirement.
And who chooses what kind of art, and who chooses the artist?
Well, we will pencil that in and get you some answers before the next meeting, just on that process.
Okay, I mean, we're talking $200,000, and I hope it's something that's going to really benefit the public in appearance and attraction.
Yeah, I'd say based on what we did at Wheaton Gateway on the corner, that was a very, public process in terms of who we were selecting and the type of art. So we can follow up on that and how it be applicable to this project.
Good, thank you.
And I would also say there is some, in that number, some additional artwork inside the building that will be privately. And we are in discussions of how to do that. Like that'll be something that the team and will look at, see what the options are. We have some very unique artwork. In a lot of cases, we might want to, let's say, demonstrate the different types of projects that we've done in the past. And so things like that there will be some of that accounted for in that number.
Up in Gaithersburg, just outside Montgomery Village, there is a amenity around the apartment buildings that amazes me in the attraction of families and children living in the apartments around. And that is a no standing water play area. So water spurts up and the children dart through it, but there's nothing left it just all goes away. You don't have the problem of standing water and so forth. But you never go by there in reasonable weather that there are not parents with their children there. And I would just love to see us be able to provide that kind of an amenity, simply because it brings people together as neighbors. And the interaction around it is amazing. And I don't think I've ever seen any kind of community amenity that has been that involving and of all ages. Seniors are sitting out watching the children reading. So I would hope that maybe we could look at that as an alternative for one of our developments. Because again, anything in my mind that brings people together and engages them with each other is constructive.
Yeah, I agree.
I would say that just outside the front door will be the Leggett and the Scrack. So there will be the opportunity for many of our, employees and colleagues to go right across the street to get their exercise in. So that's going to be a great, I think, next door amenity as well. But to your point, we will look and see just how we're accomplishing that on this particular project, just given the limited footprint, the public improvements and sidewalks.
And when is the last opportunity for the commissioners to examine the commission area in the building? I mean, at some point, once plans are submitted, we can't bring in, we don't want to bring in change orders. So at what point might we see and have a chance to look at the amenities that the building proposes?
I think at an appropriate time would be at the turn of the new year when we're coming back before the final development plan and finance plan. We did take your comments from the prior meetings about the hearing room space. So I think it'd be appropriate at the turn of the new year that we could work towards that.
I think at least one more pass at that would be appropriate, and would appreciate that.
We'll follow.
Are there other questions?
Or maybe, on your comment about the solar. This is a change from what we had planned. But I thought we had really talked about, we had talked about net zero.
Mhm.
And evidently it's not now, we're being net zero. News to us. I thought we were also working with the county in terms of solar and garage, but I guess that's not the case. What impact is that having on cost of construction and or ongoing operating costs or the wider chain?
For the record, Zachary Parks, Chief Real Estate Officer. So the general idea is still the same, which is to access solar off the Cameron parking deck. That has not changed. So as we initiated discussions with DOT on their parking deck and our idea to put solar on it and access it to get the building to net zero, because that net zero is still, we think, achievable, but much like at Hillendale with the Hillendale Senior Building getting to net zero, you have that's really renewables to get you there. So if the solar is put on Cameron and we can access it, this building should be able to achieve net zero. So that's still in the cards as well. So essentially what materialized is DOT was not thinking about it actively at the time, but apparently they have a gentleman on staff who had done lots of research and had put together some analysis, and he kind of had it on the shelf, which was very fortunate. So when we brought the discussion to them, the good news was that DOT was very open to it, and in fact has proceeded to the point where their RFP, I believe, actually includes multiple parking decks. So it's actually even bigger than just the Cameron deck. I think there's multiple parking decks in Silver Spring that they're putting out there for RFP. The biggest change was originally our thought was we would either own the system or finance and build a system and lease the system, and because of the long relationship between the county and HOC, work out an arrangement that way. Ultimately, through all of these discussions, we think DOT, because ultimately it's their call, but we think DOT is maybe going to settle on more of a community solar approach, which does not change the opportunity for us. It just changes the way it could work. And so, as you know from Paddington Square, community solar is an opportunity for solar to be provided to low and moderate income households, really anywhere in the subscriber area. But there are also opportunities for other subscribers. So In the case of Paddington, we have market rate subscribers, and then we have the low moderate income families that we're serving from that array. And so in this case, the same kind of arrangement can be struck between as with HOC being a major subscriber, serving low and moderate income households, having other market rate subscribers, however much the system will support. And so really where we are, it's not so much that anything has changed in the way of the idea, the relationship. It's really that we're waiting for DOT to really go through their process of completing this RFP, selecting a consultant and contractor to do this, and then to tell us what the final setup is going to be. At which point, once we know it's going to be community solar, for instance, then we know on what terms to engage them to still achieve the same thing that we've been talking about throughout, which is net zero for the building, trying to use it as an opportunity to improve the operating expense profile. So it's not so much that anything has changed, it's that we're just really at the point at which we have to let DOT go through their process before we can continue the conversation.
Well, it has changed if it's possible. You can't use it to the extent that we've gone through here. Had we anticipated in terms of our budget the cost of providing solar, and then so it can impact our budget?
Yeah, so originally when we were putting this together, we viewed the solar as a capital cost offset by operating savings. And so instead what's happened is that from an operating perspective, where our current operating budget is projected right now is that for other reasons unrelated to the solar. So if we just assume normal electric, for instance, we're still able to arrive at the same operating budget that we presented many years ago. It's not necessarily, and it's just because we've had other things that we've been able to do to keep that budget in line. And so at the end of the day, that presents an opportunity for the commission, because to your point, sure, like it's absolutely possible that we don't get to an agreement with DOT and we don't achieve that piece of it. We're pretty optimistic. I mean, we eventually, usually the county and HOC, when they set to do something, it takes a little bit we get there. And so we are optimistic we will get to something. The question is, what will those terms be? Because really what it comes down to is it's very likely they'll want us to subscribe, much like the Oaks landfill community solar project, and frankly things like ARRA funds way back in, if you remember, like 0809. Often the county has to come to HOC because we're sort of the best way to connect with low and moderate income families to get those subscriptions that they need. Otherwise, it'd be very difficult to get those. And so we certainly have helped them with the Oaks landfill achieve a project achieve their low and moderate income goals. And so here, we're almost certainly going to be working together on that front again. And that's great for all of our Silver Spring low moderate income residents who we will, be able to provide access to. But beyond that, it's also not easy to, it's a whole process to get people to subscribe to your community solar deal. It's achievable, it happens all the time, but the idea that they would have the major user that is bringing the county myriad benefits with the project, I think again, we just remain optimistic that at the end of the day, what they choose as our subscription rate is really what it's going to come down to. All right, on one hand, do they charge us full freight market rate? On the other hand, do they look to use it as an opportunity to help HOC achieve its mission? So.
But, you said that we had originally anticipated the capital cost for the solar. Does that mean that the increase that we talked about with Jeff is not only an increase over the original estimate, but it's also not only a 16 million increase, but it's also an increase.
Yeah, further than that, because you don't have that solar cost in there. And the only thing that's helped us is that
what was the end? So
plus we can find out what you do. But I mean, what's basically
okay. Jeffrey, have you other questions? so far?
I don't. I'm okay. Thanks. I'm just,
Okay, thank
my
you.
computer's about to die, so I'm looking for the power cord, but I'm still listening.
Okay, well, we sidetracked you, Jay, so
Oh, no, that's great.
Go from there.
It's good conversation. So essentially, Patrice, if we could go to, the next 2 slides after this. Or we can actually go to the next slide. And so, just as a recap, we are here almost in the third box. This outlined the mandatory referral process that I mentioned earlier in 2021. We had our construction documents and the procurement processes occurring this year. And in 2023, we're anticipating returning back to the commission. That'll be for the approval of our final development and financing plans. The commission approval of a third-party testing and inspections firm that has to be on board, before the permits are issued. And then ultimately the permits are released, and we are projecting construction, if that all goes well, projecting construction starting in that quarter, and ultimately ending near the end of 2024, or possibly the first quarter of 2025. But right now the projection is by Christmas of 2024. And if you go to the next slide, these are the past actions that have been presented to the commission on this item, and you can scroll through those at your convenience. And then the last slide is the issues for consideration. And so does the Development Finance Committee wish to join our staff recommendation that the commission approve the selection of Paradigm Contractors as the general contractor for the redevelopment of the Fenwick and Second parcel known as the HOC HQ site, and authorize our executive director to negotiate a guaranteed max price contract with Paradigm Contractors. And if it ultimately, again, it'd be the negotiation, we would return after that contract's ready to be signed and present that to you. And so I'm happy to answer any other questions that you may have.
Are there other questions? Is there a motion then?
Yeah, I mean, I would move to forward this to the full commission, but I also have to say that it's a bit uncomfortable. What seems to be a significantly increased cost of the building, how much we're getting committed to that, and I'm not sure that I'm comfortable that we are taking the steps that we need to see if there's a way to reduce it or to figure out why there's such a disparity in terms of cost over the past year. For us to realize between something like 30 million and 48 million in a year, that's a hell of a lot. And I think it's more than just inflation. So that's troublesome to me, and I'm not totally comfortable that I totally understand all the fine. Here's some more. I'll still support sending it forward to the commission. So okay.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
So I want to be sure I understand the motion.
The motion is to send it forward to the commission for their consideration. And it's suggesting that even though I'm making the motion, I'm unsettled in terms of the significant cost increase over the past course of the past year.
So we're not sending a recommendation to approve. We are only making a recommendation for their consideration.
My motion was yes for the consideration.
All right. Given the motion and the second, I'll call the question for the vote. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And commissioners, just so that I'm clear, the recommendation is that the staff present, the committee has approved us moving forward to present this, but has not provided support for the recommendation that the staff has made related to pursuing and moving forward with the contractor.
I mean, this is about the, if this is about the approval to select the contractor, I support that.
That's what this request is,
Yeah.
and I would, although the motion has carried, there may be an opportunity to reconsider. I would like to
called the question yet, so here's the opportunity to find something else before we take a vote.
Yes, and or modify or propose a new motion. I'd like to respond to the comment raised by Commissioner Nelson in regards to concerns about staff due diligence and concerns about the increase in cost. Surely there has been an increase in cost because of inflation, but there also was representation that was made in regards to the initial quote not being as thorough in terms of the recommendation that was presented in terms of estimate. It was just that. And so at this stage, we have much clearer guidance and input in regards to what the potential cost of the project would be. The details and what we requested in terms of costs for this project is now more aligned with what the potential outcome would be for the project. And so what was presented in April was an estimate. What is presented now is a much more thorough review. The other thing that I would just highlight in terms of where we are at this stage, if you look at even the responses we received from the general contractors, their quotes are very close as well, which I think give us a good indication of the fact that where we have currently priced the project as well as the cost for this work is closer to where we are at this stage. We can go back and we'll address what are the differences in terms of what we received before, potentially if it was not as detailed and there were other areas that weren't also reflected in that estimate so that you could understand what that delta is. But I will just indicate that, of course, we are continuously taking all efforts to ensure that we're able to get the closest and the best price for all of the work that we move forward, but also trying to avoid the potential of cost overruns. And so wanting to be as realistic as possible, not cut corners, not decrease the outcome and the product that we're also trying to move forward with for our home, our new headquarters. And so we will prepare to provide that information as well to the commission.
Yeah, I think that'll be helpful. I think, you know, it is not surprising that the cost is higher given inflation and some of the other issues. I think some of the concern maybe with, you know, that the fact that the initial estimate and this final budget, or, you know, whatever stage this budget is so different and that exceeds inflation. I think we have to be careful about, you know, there's a little bit of sticker shock here, and that be careful with our initial estimates that, you know, we're building some of that in. Like our estimates shouldn't be so lowball that, you know, by the time we get a more thorough examination of the budget, like then it comes in, you know, so much higher than, you know, what we had been led to expect. So I think that's more my concern. I can appreciate that, you know, it is higher now for the reasons that have been outlined. But, you know, a third is a lot.
I would first say that I was not questioning the due diligence of staff. So if somehow that was conveyed, that was not intended. I think the real issue is when changes like this occur during the course of planning, it would be helpful if you would alert the Development Finance Committee that things are changing and you can expect a change in price at the end of the road. I mean, for us to just taking, for example, the issue that I raised related to solar. We've talked about solar in this project for 2 years. And I find out today that it isn't the way we had talked about it. And I mean, it's not our fault, but things change. But the commission has not been advised that things are changing in terms of how the county is planning solar. The commission has not been advised that things are really changing because we're changing the construction, the mode of construction rather than this tension built stuff. And all of those things are going to have an impact on the cost. So therefore, we can be better prepared to face this sticker shock that Commissioner Merkel wants to talk about. So I think my concern is more that we are not, as major issues come up, we're not even alerted to them. I think that's part of the issue that I'm raising. And I'd like to make sure that in these major projects, we don't have those kinds of surprises. I mean, that stuff comes up all the time. I mean, it's a part of the process you guys have to go through when you were doing the development. You're going to see major issues come up that have a significant impact in terms of cost or design. And I think it would be just useful as to tell the commission or to let the commission know what to go, finance committee know, that this stuff that we've been planning and talking about for 2 or 3 years is going to change because of these circumstances. That just helps to keep us informed and know what's going on. That's really the issue.
I think the common theme that Rick and I are both saying, it's about managing expectations. So.
Understood. And I will also ask staff, as we look at our quarterly reports and update on status of projects, that's a prime opportunity. I'm certain we do provide a lot of information there. We're providing it at the time of that report. If there are significant changes that happen between those quarterly reports, I will be sure to convey that. And if we also need to consider adding an update that is outside of discussion or action items, if there are some significant shifts or changes happening with our projects between those quarterly reports, we could use that as an opportunity too. We are, of course, riding the waves along with you all and along with many of our peers as it pertains to ups and downs. Definitely want to make sure that by the time we're presenting a potential change to you, that we believe that to be the path forward and where we're headed. But I will also look to the team. I think we have a quarterly report that's coming up at the end of this year. So we'll make sure that it also reflects if there are any shifts from what we reported the last quarter in any of our other deals that we should put on your radar as a preview.
I think what troubles me here is I hate to send from the committee I guess what I define as an unanswered question. We're not giving them the.
I'll change the word.
All right.
Submitted to court approval in my motion.
All right.
Make the secondary agreement.
Jeffrey, would
Yes.
you?
Yes.
That is good.
Yes, thank you. I think the full commission looks to us to understand what's going on, raising the questions. But I would hate to sidetrack or delay moving forward, and I appreciate the change. Given so you've withdrawn your earlier motion and have moved, and it's been seconded to move forward with the staff's recommendations, but we understand that there will be some changes in keeping the committee informed and major changes. Given that, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you, commissioners.
That will be helpful. All right. Our next agenda item is authorizing the staff to execute a contract for an early start at Hillendale Gateway.
Yes, commissioners, this is another project that we continue to move forward. We have a great deal of excitement about, and that, as reflected in the presentation we just provided, has been impacted by changes in the economy. I want to share a little information before we go into this presentation in regards to a resource that we're looking forward to providing to all of the commissioners. In November, there was a 2-hour Passive House one-on-one training that was put on by our partners, Duffy and PS Ventures here in this room, allowing us an opportunity to understand all of the benefits of Passive House and how it works. There's a video that is that was prepared as a result of that is now on YouTube that we will provide commissioners with access to, and that we'll also make sure that we include in our information as we talk about this project, its uniqueness and how it works. And so this will be a broader tool that will also help the broader audience understand Passive House and generally our why. And so really excited to provide you all with that resource. We'll provide it to all of the commissioners. This particular resolution is really brought before you so that we can continue to try to stay on track with this development and this project. It is unique in the sense that we are asking for a 2-step process where we would typically come to you with one request. And so staff will explain the nuance in terms of why we're approaching it this way, ultimately trying to stay on track with our timeline, trying to reduce costs as we do that. And so this is the Hillendale Gateway authorization to execute a contract with CBG Building Group and provide limited notice to proceed for early start construction work and the approval of the early start budget and funding. I will turn it over to Catherine Hollister, our senior financial analyst and team, to explain the details supporting this request.
For the record, Marcus Irvin, Director of Development. Director Andrews provided a great summary and overview. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Catherine.
Good morning, commissioners. For the record, my name is Catherine Hollister. I'm a senior financial analyst in the real estate division. Staff is requesting that the Development and Finance Committee join staff's recommendation to the commission that authorize execution of a contract with CBG Building Group for early start construction work and approval of an early start budget and funding for Hillendale Gateway. As you may remember, at the September 14th commission meeting, the commission approved the change in Hillendale Gateway's structural system from pressing it to concrete. At that meeting, staff presented a path to ensure that the vertical construction start would not be delayed despite this switch, and told the commission that it would return for approval of an early start, which would allow for the site work to begin prior to receipt of building permits. Approval of these items today would allow for the development timeline discussed at that September commission meeting to stay on track and for the vertical construction start to not be delayed. Page 23 of your packet provides background on the Hillendale Gateway development. Hillendale Gateway will be a new mixed-use, mixed-income, multi-generational community located on the site of Hollywell Apartments. It will contain 463 units and 2 residential buildings, one a 155-unit net zero energy age-restricted senior building, and the other a 308-unit passive house non-age-restricted multifamily building. Page 24 of your packet discusses the development highlights. Hillendale Gateway is a hallmark development that incorporates a number of agency, county, and state priorities, many of which are listed here. Pages 25 and 26 of your packet provide the executive summary for today's items. The first item on page 25 is approval to execute a contract with CBG Building Group and provide a limited notice to proceed with early start work. It is common practice for HOC to enter into early start agreements with general contractors and has done so for the majority of our recent new construction and renovation transactions. Early starts are a tool to allow for a limited scope of construction to proceed prior to full construction closing and can help reduce overall development duration and project costs. Typically, the commission approves an early start along with a full GC contract value or GMP. However, for Hillendale Gateway, staff is only requesting approval of an early start in an amount not to exceed 11.5 million, and will return to the commission in mid-2023 for approval of the GMP. Reasons for this two-step approach are that the development is currently being redesigned to a concrete structure, and switch to concrete is estimated to result in significant construction cost savings. Hillendale Gateway's last repricing exercise was also at the height of historic construction cost increases. Construction prices are stabilizing, and there are early signs that prices may start to come down. And rebidding the vertical phase of construction closer to when the work will be done will result in a more competitive subcontractor bids. Page 26 of your packet, staff is also requesting approval of an early start budget and funding source. The early start budget, 14.5 million, consists of all costs needed to bring the site ready for vertical construction, and includes hard construction costs, soft costs, and contingency. Only 50% of the early start costs are projected to be drawn before the full construction closing. However, staff is requesting the entire early start budget be obligated. Staff recommends using the Housing Production Fund as the source for the early start, as Hillendale Gateway meets the funding and affordability requirements of the program. Page 27 of your packet provides the pre-development timeline for Hillendale Gateway. As discussed on this slide, approval of an early start would keep the vertical construction timeline on track, despite the delay in building permit approval due to the switch in structural frame. Page 28 of your packet summarizes the GC contract. Staff has negotiated the significant points of a two-phase contract and is requesting approval to execute the contract once negotiations are finalized. The contract would allow for a limited notice to proceed for early start work in an amount not to exceed 11.5 million. Staff will return to the commission in mid-2023 for approval of a guaranteed maximum price for the GC contract and to authorize a full notice to proceed for the vertical construction of the project. Page 29 presents the early start budget and proposed funding source. Again, the early start budget of 14.5 million consists of all costs needed to bring the site ready for vertical construction, and includes 11.5 million in hard construction costs, which is the value of the GC early start, 1 million in soft costs, and 2 million in contingency. Staff recommends using the housing production funds as a source for the early start, again, as Hillendale Gateway meets the funding and affordability requirements of the program. Page 30 discusses the benefits and risks of an early start. There are a number of benefits associated with an early start, including that it allows the development timeline to stay on track. It reduces the overall time until the project is built to stabilize and permanently finance, which reduces carrying costs. In the case of Hillendale Gateway, an early start would result in approximately 450,000 in cost savings versus if construction did not mobilize until full construction closing. And it can also result in more favorable financing terms due to the shorter construction financing period. The risks associated with the early start are mitigated by the fact that the value of the site as ready for vertical construction is more than the cost of the early start work and pre-development costs combined. Pages 31 and 32 of your packet provide details on the construction schedule, draw schedule, and projected cost savings due to the shortened development period. And then page 33 of your packet provides the issues for the committee's consideration. Staff is requesting that the Development and Finance Committee join staff's recommendation to the commission that authorize the executive director to execute a contract with CBG for an amount not to exceed 11.5 million and to provide a limited notice to proceed for the early start work. Approve an early start budget for Hillendale Gateway in an amount not to exceed 14.5 million, and authorize the Housing Production Fund as a source for the early start work in an amount not to exceed 14.5 million. Thank you for your consideration. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I have a question related to, would this early start include any relationship to the transit stop and bus stop at this time? Because if it does, I feel very strongly that there needs to be consultation with the Commission on People with Disabilities. There is a significant divergence on these transit stations and access for people with disabilities and how the county has been designing them that adversely affects people with vision and wheelchairs and mobility. And I just want to be sure that we are communicating effectively with that commission and the people who have been working, trying to work with the planning department, the Department of Transportation. We've got elderly people that are going to be living on that site. And I just want to be sure that we're doing everything possible to assure the safety of our residents there. So, and the general public that is using apparently the Department of Transportation has been pretty recalcitrant about addressing those issues. And I think it's really important that we do, since this is our community and we're making this contribution. So I would hope that conversations take place very soon.
Yeah. So the improvements, the transit improvements are included in the early start budget, and the improvements have already been designed and approved. So if there are issues related to the design, you know, I'm happy to get more information, see what we can do to incorporate those changes.
Well, I think certainly if it's already been designed, it's very important before we start moving earth that we get the input of experts for the population that we're going to be serving. So I would ask that forthwith that those plans be shown to the commission and get some insight or guidance, perhaps consulting with the people that have been consulting with them as experts on this issue.
Yeah, so we do have a third-party consultant, Stephen Winters, that has been really helpful in us incorporating accessibility and inclusive design throughout the project, both inside the building and on the site. We have, barrier-free walkways, curbless sidewalks. There are ways that we've improved the accessibility and mobility and pedestrian safety on the site. But I'd be happy to share the plans and see if there's anything else that can be done specifically to the transit center.
I really think that's imperative. Thank you. Yes.
I have no question.
Jeffrey, have you questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I move to support the staff recommendation.
And I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. It is approved.
Thank you, commissioners.
I don't believe we have any other items to come before us this morning. So I will declare the meeting closed.
Adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you.